Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gerda, I'm very happy to be here, and I know that civil society has his own way and his own time also. It's important to realize that your time is not exactly our time, and sometimes this makes things more difficult and gives some frictions that we must learn how to find a way out. I'm saying that because there is a lot of anxiety those days about actions. I have been in New York for the Climate Change Forum Summit, and what we heard most is that stop talking, it's time for action. But what we see is that we're still talking, negotiating, trying to find consensus. This is really something difficult. I have learned it from my own experience. And what I also learned, I told you last year at the same time here, the same moment, that the importance of build consensus is not only the inclusiveness that Gerda told us, but if we have consensus, we can move ahead faster. Because one of the most difficult things is when you start to move ahead, stop all the time to rebuild consensus that was not yet achieved. Last year, I was invited also to speak here, and I started giving the reasons that I see important this mechanism and the participation of civil society in the decisions of the CFS and also in the decision of FAO. And I gave 4 reasons, if you remember. The first one is that exactly build consensus. You're a part of the consensus that we need to achieve. The second one was a peculiar fact that the unnourished people, the hunger people, does not have voice. They need someone to speak for them. I quoted Lula when he was the leader of the unions, that he said, "I never found a union of hungers. I have seen unions of all kinds of different people, but never an organization of hunger people." So they need us, you, to speak for them. Third was to represent the diversity of the society. Society is quite diverse, and we need to valorate that. Sometimes I believe that we valorate more biodiversity on the natural environment than the difference of opinion. We are not, let's say, so proud to respect our neighbor in his opinion. And that is the worst thing, when this difference, most of them ideological one, become personal fights. And we, instead of treating the divergence as adversaries, we face them as enemies. The fourth important reason is that this mechanism is part of the international decision-making process. You have to be aware of this and the importance of this. And decision-making process at a global level probably the CFS is the only mechanism on this governance of food security globally that we have in this moment. And this is a very important achievement, despite it takes a long time to come to decision and to implement them. But we must not forget what we achieve, what we already achieved. I will start with the right to food guidelines that we are commemorating 10 years now. You may say, well, there is little implemented. Well, there's a few things implemented, especially in my region, Latin America. We have been doing a lot with that at national level. The voluntary guidelines is another outstanding achievement. And now we hope, the principle of responsible agricultural investment. That is all of us waiting. But CFS is not only the one example of many others that we have now, civil society and private sector participation in FAO. Since I took office, I implemented what I call a policy of open doors, trying to bring inside FAO different partners, different representations, and I believe that we achieve several goals. One of them was just mentioned by Zola when she mentioned the voluntary guidelines for sustainable small-scale fisheries that was approved in May this year on the Committee on Fisheries. These voluntary guidelines that had the participation of Chandrika Sharma involved 4 years of negotiation and 4,000 people around the world. Long time, but a strong consensus around it. And this is facilitating us to implement. I can list other things that we already achieved. And one of the very important that we must keep in mind is that we have introduced important ideas in this international agenda. For example, I will start with food sovereignty. This is part of the international agenda nowadays. I will mention again Latin America, that's taking the lead on this, even at constitutional level in some countries. But it's part of the agenda of the regional meetings of FAO. You know that FAO is not known to be in the front line of new ideas, but this time we are there. And this was due to the strong participation of civil society in our meetings in the region. Another main achievement of new ideas, agroecology, that we just have a very important meeting a few weeks ago here. As I said, the opportunity opened a window in the cathedral of the Green Revolution. It's not let's say, something that should not be noted. It's an important achievement. But most important of all, the family farm year that we are commemorating today. You see even a special publication of FAO this year, the state of food and agriculture is dedicated to family farming. So these are important achievements. So be sure that your participation on those international fora are very important, despite the timing difference that we have for the achievements that we expect. Allow me to turn to Spanish for a few considerations more. Esas conquistas.
There are many other victories that lie ahead. There is a long list still ahead. We still need to discuss the post-2015 agenda on sustainable development goals. This will allow us to make more daring proposals. For instance, we have already managed to include the eradication of poverty, hunger and misery as part of an agreement. And this will be part of the post-2015 agenda. We wanted to eradicate poverty and hunger, and now we're given the right to fight to eradicate poverty and hunger. This is now part of FAO's program of work, i.e. to eradicate hunger. There are over 800 million people who suffer from hunger. And therefore, this is a very ambitious goal. We also wish to fight against malnutrition. There is an international conference of nutrition coming up. And we will also be addressing the issue of increasing obesity among children. This challenge is just as important as the challenge of fighting hunger. And there are many other challenges that we need to face. One of the main challenges is to change the way we work. This is almost never part of our agenda. And I would like to highlight a weakness that I myself have noticed, not only here, but also in other international bodies and international fora. I'm referring to a linkage between the local level and the regional level, as well as the national level and the international level. We need to work very hard on this if we wish to implement the voluntary guidelines on which we reach consensus here. We work very hard at reaching consensus, and what I have seen is that implementation is not always effective because we are not necessarily present at the grassroots level, at the local level. It's at this level that we really need to take the most important decisions. FAO will continue playing a neutral role so that you may reach consensus on your main ideas, and we wish to continue achieving agreements. Many of these guidelines are voluntary, but some of them are binding, such as the Plant Treaty. This is a very important treaty for many countries, and there are many other examples that I could mention. And now, just to conclude, I'd like to speak Portuguese, taking advantage of the fact that we have interpreters who work from Portuguese. This is not often the case at the FAO. So building consensus is very hard. But personally, I believe that based on our previous experience, it's worth it. In order to build consensus, we need to be flexible. In Brazil, we call this being as flexible as possible. In Brazil, there is an expression that says to move your waist. Not sure how that is translated into English, but if you are going to go to war, you need to choose the best warrior. But this is not a space for war. This is a space for building consensus. So I'd like to reiterate, there are divergent views, but it's a positive aspect because it raises many issues. Those who think differently are not enemies. And we can't take things personally. We can't take these battles at a personal level. This is a way of building a common agenda. So I'd like to repeat, people should not wait. People can't wait. People can't lose out on opportunities. I'm going to ask you to help in this area. The International Conference on Nutrition will take place next year. After 22 years, we'll even get the Pope to visit us here. We've managed that. So we would like to leave this room with a political statement and an agenda for action. Our goal is to approve 2 documents during the first day of the conference, and yet unfortunately we haven't managed to reach consensus yet. I am going to leave this room now and go to another meeting where member states are trying to overcome many differences. It's in the next room. There are many sensitive political issues on the table. Many issues that have nothing to do with nutrition, and yet they have been put on the table during this conference on nutrition to take advantage of the occasion. And this is not useful when building consensus. I think many of you know some of the participants. Imagine if you have to tell the Pope that we don't have a political statement. And if the Pope comes here and asks me, what are you going to do? I'm going to have to answer, well, I don't know what we're going to do. Imagine the reaction of the international community. They expect the FAO and the WHO, who are also meeting today, to reach consensus. And imagine if we turn around and say, we don't know what we're going to do. We simply can't allow ourselves to do this because we're missing out on opportunities. So I'd just like to conclude now. Today has been a very emotional morning, so I'd also like to quote a Brazilian poet and singer who spent most of his life in Chile. I am referring to the music of General Vandré. During the May 68 demonstrations, we used to sing these songs. This was one of the first demonstrations against the political dictatorship in Brazil. And the music goes, come on, let's move on, because waiting is not knowing. Those who know decide the time to act. They do not wait for it to happen. I'm not going to try and translate it myself, but I'd like to repeat it now. It says, come, let's move on, because waiting is not knowing. Those who know decide the time to act. They do not wait for it to happen. Thank you very much.
Cool.